Meeting of the Seymour City Council to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Jim Ashley?
Yes.
Mary Carpenter?
Yes.
Nadine Chris?
Yes.
Dan Weimer?
Yes.
It is determined there is a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Got one more coming in. I'd like to call on two more coming in. I'd like to call on my neighbor, Jim Ashley, to lead us in prayer. If you'd all stand, please.
Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight with thankful hearts. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to work here tonight on the behalf of the citizens of Seymour, and we just pray that you will bless us, Lord, that your will be done in everything that we attempt. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen. If you would, join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Place the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated, please. All right, I'll direct your attention to the minutes from our previous meeting. Has every member of the council got a copy of those minutes?
Yes.
Have you all had a chance to look over those minutes?
I move we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the minutes as presented. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we'll move on into new business. I'll direct your attention to the first thing on the agenda is the oath of office by South Ward Alderman Dan Weimer. I'd like to ask my city clerk to come forward and to administer the oath of office to Mr. Weimer. Mr. Weimer, if you'd come out to the microphone there. And Madam Clerk.
I, Dan Weimer,
I, Dan Weimer,
do solemnly swear
that I possess all the qualifications for the office of South Ward Alderman,
that I possess all the qualifications for the office of South Ward Alderman
as prescribed by law,
as prescribed by law,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of all laws of the state affecting cities of this class,
the provisions of all laws of the state affecting cities of this class,
and the ordinances of the city of Seymour, and faithfully demean myself in office, so help me God.
and the ordinances of the city of Seymour, and faithfully demean myself in office, so help me God. All right.
Very
Sign and
good.
give to you.
What do they say? Dilly dilly. Welcome, Mr. Weimer.
Thank you.
I'd direct your attention next of all to the bills. They are brief this time. And so has every member of the council got a copy of the bills? And
Yep.
I would ask for any questions that come forward about any item you see on the list, and you would direct those to our city clerk here that's sitting immediately to my left.
What's this meal reimbursement, $39.21?
Okay, that is out of petty cash. Cy Yates has been going to water class. How many days a week? 2. So that's probably, he's on how many weeks? So that's 3 weeks of no reimbursement.
What about this Lab Top Mountain Charger?
That, Scott can answer that.
Who?
Scott,
You
Scott,
remember we, at the last council meeting, we had got a mountain charger for the Ford Explorer. This one was for the Dodge Charger.
Would that not come out of the fire department?
well, we have, I think what Councilman Chris is referring to is that 3/8% sales tax, and that's for capital improvements. And the way I understand that, Mr. Link could weigh in on this, but I understand that that money can be used for capital improvements. Since this is an addition to one of our vehicles, I think it certainly could come out of that fund. Mr. Link?
I concur.
Right. So the answer to your question is yes, that can come out of that fund. So are you
I
directing?
don't think it should.
Why is that?
I think that should come out, if there's money in the department to pay for it. I don't think we need to touch that 3/8 cent sales tax until we have to.
That's not
I- If we needed the money, I could see it, but we don't. We're not in that position, so I think it should come out of the general fund. What is it, $100 or something like that?
No, it's,
Whatever.
Altogether, it's about $600.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
well,
I thought it was
when you
50 about
consider,
that vehicle with
Well, that's
that.
the way I understood it too, that it would be for maintenance on the vehicles that we bought.
Yeah, you gotta
Not
purchase
for a
the
piece of
vehicle.
existing equipment, but maybe I misunderstood.
well,
I
it,
think you could, it's just general maintenance for those departments, so I mean, it's not, it's legally could come out of that, fund, but I mean, it's.
Yeah,
the
I don't think we
board's
should,
call.
that's just my opinion.
Oh, it's for the police car now, but.
I have it here.
Yes,
This is new equipment?
yeah, this is new equipment. We
Right.
got, like I said, we got a new mount, is a power supply converter for the computers, so that we can have laptop computers in the cars. It just makes it more effective for the officers, not have to keep running in and out of the office anytime they need to get on a computer.
Yeah.
Well, I think the voter intent of that, Paul's a legal guy. Voter intent of that tax certainly was for, new equipment. I think that people saw that as an infrastructure-related type of tax. Sort of like the pool tax, we could sit around here and say that we could use it on the parks. But that wasn't voter intent. So I think voter intent on that tax was for new equipment. I don't have a problem on this expense. I wouldn't be a fan of using it to put new tires on a car. That would be maintenance. I think that violates what the public wants. I wouldn't have a problem, maybe since this is new equipment, this is improving your vehicle, correct?
Yes,
To make your vehicle better.
it's making, us more streamlined in how we work, more effective.
Is that a new computer that went on there?
No, actually, the computers, whenever Ron left, I actually found that we had the computers in the back room already. All we had to do was get Patty to clean them up a little bit, and we're working fine. From my understanding, the department, got those computers from the state, I believe given to us, about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's been sitting in the back room ever since.
I see what Jim's implying. I can see what Jim thinks is the way he does, because I think he's probably operating from the same threshold I am in that this tax was one that was for improving the equipment that these departments have, whether it be the fire or the police. You know, so I theoretically, I don't think this is a bad thing because it's new equipment, but, you know, pressing forward, I don't think that we need to be using this for just general maintenance, because that
No.
wasn't voter intent. That's how I weigh in on it. I mean, I'll leave it to the thinkers to determine what fund it goes to. That's sort of the staff that handles bills department, but
to answer your question more directly, Nadine, the total expense on that was about $548, and then there's approximately $100 for installation, so it would have been about a $648 expense. However, that being said, there probably is money in the account at this time to cover that expense. So it's not something we would have to use it for. We are looking at maybe purchasing a new cruiser, and if that takes place, they present that to you for the need for that, then my suggestion on that would be from this 3/8% sales tax. Because we've collected enough money to do that. It wouldn't be an expense to the city now. We had the money in the fund. Does that answer your question, Ms. Chris? Okay. So what is your directive then to probably take that money from the existing fund?
Yes.
Okay. Any opposition to that? Okay. Any other questions on the bills?
I do want to make a general observation I'm seeing on the payroll records. We're incurring a lot of overtime in the police department, which I know is another discussion point, but I do think it shows the need we need to hire an officer to. That's an observation, not a directive, just, I'm noticing that, there's a lot of overtime being paid.
Very good, and I have noticed that as well. Scott, where we stand as far as being totally staffed the way we need to be?
Well, of course, we need the chief appointed. The officer that y'all had approved to hire last meeting called me up yesterday and informed me that he had been given another offer and was not gonna be taking the job.
Is that one of the,
Brandon Nook.
I see.
We have Sean Seymour, who started as a reserve. He's worked a couple of shifts. I've got some more applications here, but basically we need to fill 2 more positions.
Very good, and that's what Councilman Weimer is just saying, that we need to get moving on that and get that done. Okay, any other questions about the bills as presented? Chair would entertain a motion then to accept the bills as presented and to ratify the approval of paying those bills.
Move to pay the bills.
We have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Bills are approved. We'll move on then to the next item on the agenda. Citizen comments. I'd like to ask any citizen that is in our midst this evening that has a comment for the city to come forward to the mic that's been placed there for you. State your name and please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Are there those in the audience which need to come to the council to address the council? Seeing none, I guess we're doing a good job, council. No questions, looks like. Next thing on your agenda is the Ronald McDonald Proclamation. And I suppose you all have a copy of that in front of you. If you don't, we'll make you a copy. You have, everybody has a copy? I'll read the first paragraph here for those in the audience. It says, whereas Springfield 2 Ronald McDonald houses have provided a home away from home and an invaluable resource or source of hope and comfort for the families of seriously ill and injured children who must travel far from home for medical treatment and so on. And there's several other paragraphs here, but here's the thrust of the whole matter. Now therefore, I, Larry Chafin, Mayor of the City of Seymour, do hereby proclaim February the 12th through February the 18th, 2018 as Ronald McDonald House Week. So it's a proclamation that we're recognizing the Ronald McDonald houses for just doing that, providing a home away from home for seriously ill children. And I've seen the one in St. Louis, and we have a couple here in town. So it's a good work. It's tremendously good thing. So so that's what we're doing. I guess, do we need a motion for that? I guess we do.
No.
We don't need a motion for that?
We usually don't.
No.
Okay, since I don't need a motion, then it's been done. And I'm proclaiming that and with my signature. Such as it is, it has been done.
Thank you.
All right, the next thing up is your utility board discussion. You all should have a copy now of those items that I placed before you, or that Sam placed before you, rather, as I asked for him to do he provided for us a sort of a tractor run-on to accommodate this utility board. Now, we talked about that some last week, and then it was put on the agenda for this session so that we might further discuss these items that we have placed on there so that we could finalize it and give it to Mr. Link, and if that's agreeable, then at the next meeting, I would bring you that finalized copy, and also I would appoint to you 5 people to serve on this board. Now, I don't know if you've been following the news, but I think that the city of Springfield must have heard what we were doing, so they're trying to study their utilities as well to see how to better accommodate the citizens of Springfield. So they're following on our heels in this regard. So I would direct your attention to those several qualifications or qualifying sentences, paragraphs, and we did talk about the one on the 3rd paragraph down that I would like to change, and I'll read that for you again. There was some discussion about that, and we'll add whatever you need to add to that to make it work. I'll just read it. The Electric Rate Utility Commission shall be composed of 5 persons, 2 of which can be those who own business property or residential property. That was added at the last meeting, my footnote. In the incorporated city limits of Seymour, but do not necessarily reside in the city limits. In other words, 2 of these people, 2 out of the 5, would be people who own property in the city but do not necessarily live here. 3 of which are composed of those shall be those who reside in the incorporated city limits. All the appointed persons shall have been residents or owned business property in Seymour for the past 2 years. So you don't have a novice, as it were, on this commission. And I think this is a very valuable thing that we can do for the citizens of our town. When we institute this, we'll have 5 people looking at the way we're structured and giving us advice, and that's the only thing they'll be doing, is looking at our rates and how they affect the citizens and the businesses of our town. So with that, Chair would entertain any discussion in reference to any item on this proposal to change it to make it fit better our wishes.
I've got a few things, Larry.
Yes.
Starting with composition, when you're talking about that, with 5 members, with 3 living in the city limits and 2 from those outside the city limits.
Correct.
First, I would suggest that the 2 from outside the city limits have Seymour addresses, meaning that they have a address out of the Seymour post office as their primary residence, and then noting that they also own property in the city, as you mentioned before. I don't, again, you changed it so that, from what you just said, they don't have to own business property, they just own property.
Correct.
Okay, and they have to own that property for at least 2 years.
2 years, yes.
Okay.
Or have lived in the city for 2 years.
That's my thoughts on composition. 2 down, nonpartisan, when you talk about the compensation. I think that a salary of $100 per year is quite paltry, considering that these folks are going to be discussing rates. I would suggest that you give them $100 per meeting. This is serious. I mean, we're talking about something that is right now billable at almost $2 million a year.
That's right.
So if we're talking about those kind of numbers, and there's going to be a lot of thought required in this, then I would suggest we pay them per meeting. It stipulates that there was at least going to be quarterly, but just whenever they meet, I would suggest that, because they're going to be on the front line when some residents hacked off about their utility rate, they're going to be listening to it, because we're not listening to it anymore.
That's right.
If this is
And
compulsory-
that's where the problem comes in with the people in Seymour. My phone has rang, I've been stopped on the street, telling me not to do this, but I haven't heard anybody in Seymour say, you know, I think that utility commission is a good idea. I think we're making a mistake. I think we're doing something that the people in town don't want,
But then they do want lower utility bills.
and this isn't gonna get it.
Well,
I mean, that's my opinion, but that's what they believe too. And also, been told flat up, if those utility rates need to be studied, you boys up there need to study them.
who you talking
Meaning the
What
Aldermen.
boy?
No, meaning us,
Yeah,
meaning
well,
us.
I certainly, this is merely an advisory board, though. I mean, this is,
Yes, that's,
this is much like a park board or
Right,
any
yeah,
other board.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And from what from what people are telling me, they don't want another board.
about? I'm not heard
I've not heard anything on it.
well, that, your point is well taken, Councilman Ashley. This has already been approved by
I
the
know.
council.
I know.
We're just trying to make sure that the nuts and bolts are there to make it work right.
But,
You know,
hey,
every,
I've said my 2 cents worth. People
Well-
don't want us to do what we're doing.
I
But
understand.
how can we get the utility rates down then, people?
How, well, can't we look at that and do that
I
here?
don't know, you said never done anything.
Well, I don't think we need another board to go do that. When they get done studying that, we're gonna need the exact same amount of money to run Seymour as we do now.
Yeah.
Exactly. So how you gonna get the rates down?
I don't know.
Couldn't we
But I
do
hear
this
more from
instead of
clients.
appointing another board?
I think ultimately, the way I look at this, Jim, I would think that we ultimately would still be doing it because this board really can't do anything.
Making,
I mean,
they're just making
they're-
suggestions.
You know, they're an advisory group. Let me do that, let's do this. Sam, you're a hired gun, you're a paid administrator. What are your thoughts on this board?
Well, I can see that there would be some controversy as far as them bringing to the table what they think. Obviously, if this group here doesn't agree with them, it's not gonna work. So, I can't help but agree with Jim that if this group of people right here, these 4 people that are sitting here that are elected, if they can't do this and come up with a number, this board's not gonna be able to either. Not one that you can agree on.
Let's do this, would this at least, in the meetings I've attended over the past few years, this board hasn't done a very good job of discussing utility rates. So maybe
Amen.
this board would be a good one to start the discussion.
So Paul, what's your thought on it?
Well, I see both sides on this, and that, I think what the board voted on and approved for this was they want an advisory board, almost like a park board, to look at these rates, study, and have the actual time to dig into all this and come back and make recommendations on rates. And that allows the board to review their recommendations. What I don't know if matches up is, I'm envisioning, if I was a board member, I'd want to see a fairly sophisticated accounting type spreadsheet of, we're going to cut this rate here, and we're going to add revenue over here, so at the end of the day, we still have the money to run the city. I don't know who all will be on this board. I'm a little leery of this board basically just looking at it and saying, yeah, let's lower the rates by X, and not really doing the actual accounting to see if it works, since you guys are gonna end up doing all the work anyway.
And if that's brought to the board then, and we don't go with their recommendations, the board members are gonna throw their hands up and say, what's the point? Seymour Board of Aldermen won't pay any attention to what we're doing.
Well,
I mean,
we'll have to
another thought I
understand,
have, not
we're
to
just
interrupt, but,
recommending.
I mean, there are cities that, this costs a lot of money, but I mean, if the question is, can you lower rates? I mean, you could hire a consultant to come look and see what the city charges for utilities and what their budgets are and stuff, and say, we run all the numbers, and they're basically CPA type big people and engineers, and they say, this is what I think you could lower your rates to, or more likely than not, in cities I've worked with, they come back and say your rates are way too low and you need to raise your rates. And so then, what do you do with that? Because if the goal is we want to lower everybody's rates, and then everybody comes back and says, man, your rates are way too low for what you need to raise them, then what do you do?
Well, here's the way I,
I believe the people that comes in and tells me that their utility bill is more than their house payment.
And
And,
I don't
you know-
dispute that. I would be willing to venture a bet that every city in America has a certain percentage of their population that thinks their utility
True.
bill is way too high.
True. Here's the way that I see this thing unfolding. I think that any change, people are hesitant to change, and we all know that. It's hard to make changes in your life or in the way you do things. It's a change here in the way we've been doing things. We hire professional people to give us advice. What I see in this board is professional people that are accomplished in their businesses, and they look at this thing from a business standpoint, but then you've also got a grassroots input. People who are rank and file of the town. So you get a broad spectrum of looking at this thing. Then they make a recommendation predicated on business experience as well as practical usage. And then they give that to us. What it helps us with is that we get the minds and the experience of people in this community that we could not hire to do this. And then they make a recommendation to this board. So I think it's a win-win situation for the city of Seymour. Before they see the effect of this board, yes, there's going to be resistance. There always is to change. But I think it's a positive change, and other sister cities, such as Springfield, are looking into their commission rates even now, just as we're doing. So I think it's moving in the right direction. And yes, will it meet with some opposition? Anytime there's change, it will. But I think we have it within our reach to do this thing. And in fact, we've decided to do this thing, just how to best do it by putting together the nuts and bolts of these requisites and then move forward into this and see what we can do for the people of the town.
Here's my commentary on it, Larry. I'm not going to stand in the way. The board approved it. And if I'm not mistaken, these members that you appoint have to be approved by this board 3-1. That was in the.
Yes.
I think that's correct.
Yes.
So we're going to have essentially a vast 75% majority on any appointee. The only thing I would ask is I would like to see a biography of any candidate presented to this board. I would like to see essentially a resume. I would want to see their educational experience. I would want to see any qualifications to help me make.
In your decision.
Yes, absolutely. Help me make a better decision whether I think they'll fit or not, you know? Because the people that are on this board, if this works, they're making tough decisions.
Sure they are.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because what they're going to find, more than likely, is that we're low in some areas and we're high in
Too
some
high in
areas.
others.
And, you know, and they're also going to have to realize that when people are mad about their rates, we're sending them first to them. And it is their duty to listen to them. If it's a 30-minute diatribe, they're going to have to listen to it for 30 minutes.
Correct.
And then those same people have the right to come before this board and voice those concerns again.
That's right.
Right.
If they tell them, if they have us raise their utility rates, they're coming to you, Dan.
Yeah. So I like the idea. I mean, if it doesn't work, we can always dismantle this board.
Exactly.
Sure we can.
Because there's no power in this board. I guess all we're out is the $100 a meeting or $100 a year, or whatever that we decide. But I see the positive in it, but I really do. I think in the selection process, Larry, just from my perspective, I really want to see who these folks are, because it takes a special person to be on this board.
Sure.
And they really need to have at least some experience in dealing with things I would look for is, have they served on a public board before? Have they been on a school board? Have they been on a board where they have people hacked off at them? Because that's gonna happen on this thing. People aren't gonna come just because they wanna tell you how good you're doing. They're gonna come to this meeting because they're ticked.
Mr. Mayor, can I add something real quick?
Yes, you may.
All I was gonna say, and I think it's moving in the right direction too, what this board, in my, just in viewing it from an outside of elected official, what I think you need to be prepared for though is, in a town this size, the people that are on this utility commission are gonna be, everybody's gonna know who they are. And so
Sure.
they're gonna be fielding a lot of complaints, and the easy thing for them to do is just say, recommend a rate reduction, because it gets everybody off their back as far as yelling at them and being concerned with them. So what this board needs to be prepared is, that board is likely going to recommend a rate reduction without having looked at how it affects the overall city budget. So more than likely, you all are gonna be faced with a recommended rate reduction, and then potentially be the bad guy where you say, well, yeah, but they didn't look at these 10 other factors in the
But
budget, and
when they
therefore denied.
When they make that decision to lower the rates, they're going to have some type of proof that that's the right way to go, and that we can even do
Theoretically,
that.
yes, but
Why,
they
I-
know it's just an advisory board.
I think this, when Sam was present, Larry was present, when we had an informal discussion about this with the fella who was from, how do you say it, Sam? Yeah. Okay. He essentially said, the one thing that you have to do with this board is you have to give them a budget. They get a budget that says, the city has to have X revenue, period. No matter how you set the rates, our budget says, we've gotta have X profit from the service. So, however you set these rates, that's why I'm saying, these people have gotta be math folks, that's why I wanna see the resumes, because we're gonna give them a number that says, you gotta hit the target. If you don't hit the target, don't come to us. We're not listening to any rate structure you have unless it hits the number we've gotta have to run the city. So, they can't say, oh, let's cut it to 7 cents across the board, because it would not hit our revenue target. You know,
Right.
now they could come up with a plan that says, well, residences pay 7 and businesses pay 15, and that might make some people happy, but at that point, that's where our oversight would come into play. But hopefully, we have enough people picked that are logical folks, that, again, that's why I wanna see the resumes. That's my only commentary on it.
Very good, very good. Well, I think we've gotten good discussion. You know, we pay people who are more skilled than we to give us advice on how to do the job. And like I say, these folks, and I don't know who will agree to serve on this board, but the people that we would appoint to you, you'll have a full line of reasoning for them, and we'll do this in closed session and then make it available to the general public what our decision is. But, you know, if I was in this community, and I am, and I think, well, my bill's a little bit high, you say, well, we've just appointed a board to look at your utility rate, and if your neighbor down the street there is paying 2 cents and you're paying 3, that's just an example, and we're going to adjust that so that you're both paying the same thing, I'd feel good about that. I feel like my rights are being served, and you're trying to help me, and maybe my rate would go down. Maybe somebody else's rate that was paying too little would go up. That'd make me feel good, saying the city's really looking out for my best interest, and that's what this is all about. So with that, any further discussion on the qualifications for this board? Seeing none, let me just review here just shortly. In the composition, we want to add
See
that-
my addresses.
Seymour addresses to the composition clause. On the appointment, we should say that these people would have resumes and a background experience. On the nonpartisan, the Administrative Electric Utility Commission shall, in all respects, be entirely nonpartisan. Each member of said commission shall receive a salary of, we'd make that change to $100 per meeting. And perhaps I need to go over these one at a time, and we'll vote on those, and then we'll vote on the whole thing together. So the first thing I would come back to then would be the composition. Changing that one clause there to read that they would have Seymour addresses. All those in favor of that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Did you have something further to say on that, Dan? Oh, you were just voting, okay.
I can say-
Okay, so that would be,
I can't vote for it because all I've heard is don't do it.
okay.
I mean, for that reason, I can't vote for it.
Yeah, and I understand, Jim, and the board or the chair recognizes your right to abstain from that. So let the record show that Jim Ashley is,
Are we taking a vote?
we're taking a vote
Are we
on the
having a
changes
motion
to,
and a second?
Okay, we'll
Is that- Or
say,
do you want, are we doing it on it all?
Let's just read these on, can't you just read them on an informal approval and then roll it all into one motion?
sure,
Do that.
we can do that. In fact, if you've all had a chance to read over those, then the only changes that I would submit to you would be in the composition section, and the only changes that we've made there are the ones that I stated, and then further tonight, that they would have Seymour addresses. And then on the appointment,
Is property already in there, or?
well, it was,
Okay,
but that was,
property's okay.
I'll go over that again. That have Seymour addresses and are residential or commercial property in the city for 2 years. So on the next section here on appointment, that these folks would have a resume and a business background to submit to each council member. And then the third thing was the nonpartisan. Instead of $100 per year, we'd change that to $100 per meeting, and I don't foresee these folks meeting but once a quarter anyway, so I don't think it's a big issue, but anyway, those are the changes. Any further changes? Seeing none, Chair would entertain a motion to accept these qualifications as presented with the changes made.
So made.
We have a motion on the floor to accept this.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign.
Aye.
Okay, I was gonna say abstain next, but, so you can be on the negative side. So the motion passes with the one negative vote. All right, I'll direct your attention then to the next thing on the agenda is the supervisor's report. Mr. Mitch Plummer.
We worked on a heater for the forestation.
All right,
And, put a ceiling in the old hotel over there, worked on that. Got it up there. We've been helping Roger down the sewer plant quite a bit, ready for the UV and a couple of contractors that did yesterday.
wonderful.
The concrete wall, and having quite a few locates. Had to work on the jet machine, the sewer machine, but it's frozen.
How's that coming, Mitch, on that machine? Was it serious?
Parts back on there, so we put the water in.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
all right, until we need it.
And several dogs called, moved the recycling trailers and, get caught up on work orders and they try to get back to the places in their home.
Okay, all right, good. Any questions for Mitch in his report?
What are you getting done on Mr. Dent's electric?
Because we can't get in that field.
Oh, well, that's what
Mitch, I have a question for you regarding the polls. Your department, electric specifically, regarding the polls, you just got you and Lance, correct? How feasible, honestly, we need to replace, we've got essentially advisor, or an expert that came in and said we need to replace 100+ phones. It seems to me with your day-to-day work, how on earth can you land set 100 phones? That's,
It's gonna take a good time.
well, that's just insane. I mean, that's not gonna happen.
And there's some that's like, there's some that's sitting on the highway,
Yeah.
we need to get contractors
Well,
Yes.
that's what I'm leaning to. I've watched, as a citizen here, or as a newspaper guy, whatever, I've watched us dance around this issue for 6 months and nothing's getting done. Do you know a contractor that we could initiate contact with? No. I'm sure Sam probably does.
We
Take
can certainly
bids.
find someone, yes, we can.
I think that we need to, instead of talking about it, we need to seriously look at hiring a contractor, at least soliciting bids, just to see how much we're looking at to have these guys set these poles. Because it's an infrastructure issue. The poles aren't healing, you know, so they're only getting worse. So, and I think it's ridiculous to have you and Lance out there setting poles when you guys are busy keeping power on in this town.
Right.
So, that's my perspective. I don't know if we need any movement on this, but I really think we need to, even if it means we just have you hit forward with this, Sam, I really want us to explore that option,
Okay,
so we can get this done.
all right.
That way we can quit talking about it.
Right.
We've set aside budgeted monies for that specifically, and so, with Sam's oversight, all we need to do is locate a, contractor and move forward on this thing, and what the stopgap would be is the end of the budget monies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're not gonna have to worry about that because it's gonna take, we're gonna be into the next fiscal year before we can even get another 100 poles here. How long did it take to get that last load?
It don't take very long.
I thought it took us a long time.
Well, got some new bids, and we was working on stuff, but once they brought them, it don't take very
Yeah.
long. And we talked to a pole guy today, and probably 3 weeks.
Oh, that'd be great
yeah,
then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we can get the
Well, that's
material.
good, because we'll know as we enter the next budget
Yeah,
year
yeah.
exactly what we've got left and what we need to appropriate to finish the job.
In fact, I'm gonna speak to that just a little bit here in a minute in my report, but
Okay.
anything else for, Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Plummer, I should say.
No.
Thank you for that report. And I remember at the last meeting, I looked over at Mr. Plummer and his face, just as red as a beet, and I think I said something about, I can tell where you've been at today. Been out in the weather. And they are.
So do we need a motion to get bids?
Well, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
we're a budgeted item.
Let's go.
All right.
We're a budgeted item. We set monies aside in the budget to take care of this, and the thought was that we would hire contractors to help us in this work. And if we just use contractors to start setting these poles, and the constraint on us would be the budget. And when we expended our budget amount, then we'll just wait till the next year to do some more.
Okay. Well,
A good thought.
Let's plan for next meeting, that we'll have some numbers that we can look at, and if, Sam, if you're busy, I know you don't want your plate, then you can always assign it to one of your assistants.
Well, since we're talking about that, when we came together at our last meeting, we had some negative criticism about not getting anything done. So what I asked Mr. Burke to do was to draft me a plan for the balance of January, for February, March, April, May, and June, up to June the 30th, and then our new fiscal year starts July the 1st, of what we're going to do as a city. And Sam, I think you've handed that off to some of your underlings, but have you got any work at all done on that?
I handed off the pole thing to Mitch and the street thing to Chuck, and Chuck is just about through with his. He likes the final report, and he'll have the street thing done, and I haven't talked to Mitch about the poles.
We just did.
Well,
We did, and here's the thing, and here's what I'd like to see, Sam. You're the city administrator. You put together a plan, and let's move forward in implementing the plan.
well, I think we talked about that tonight, Larry.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, and I understand what city council has said they want done.
Okay.
I'll get the contractor bids, as many as I can, probably 2 or 3, and we'll go forward with that.
Yes. Now, here's the way I see it unfolding. Sam's gonna give me a outline of what we're gonna do the next 6 months. I'm gonna do a PowerPoint presentation for you and say, here's what we're gonna do in January. Here's what we're gonna do in February. And with Mitch and Lance working in concert with that, some of that work they'll be able to do. But some of that work we won't be able to do, and so we'll contract out. And we'll have a tractor run-on. And at the end of the month, we'll look at that report and see how close to the mark we got. So, and that's what I like. If I'm, if I'm doing a job, I like to know what's expected of me at the end of the day. And have I hit that mark? And if not, why, we'll talk about why we didn't get there. So we'll have that coming no later than February the 8th.
That was the date that I gave both of them.
And I'll have for you a presentation of that report at that time, what we expect to do in the balance of these next 6 months. All right. We're going to move on into Assistant Supervisor's Report. Chuck Smith. Chuck.
You all have a copy of my report. Pretty short tonight. We started working on the play area. We talked about that in previous meetings, what we're doing out there. We've been kind of derailed on that because of the weather. We spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks in the pile trucks putting salt out. And every time you put salt in the trucks, when you're done, you've got to clean them out and neutralize the salt and all that, keep them from rusting up. So that's kind of getting a lot of our time up the last 2 weeks. The ground dried out a little bit, and we're going to get back on the play area tomorrow. I've got a few things here from the last board meeting. Signs were mentioned. We had some that were fading or damaged. I've ordered signs, and we already started this week replacing some of them. We'll continue to do so. So we picked up some rock boulders and placed them over here on Old Hillcrest on each end to block the road. We got those from Double Eagle. They were cheap. So we stuck them out there. It's something that if we ever need to move them, we can easily move them. I've got signs ordered to put signs on each end, saying do not enter and no vehicles beyond this point. Those should be in tomorrow. If they come in tomorrow, we'll have them up tomorrow. Place an ad in the newspaper for the arborist on the square. I've got no response on that. I'm meeting with them tomorrow morning, show them what we're needing done and anything else that they did to us.
Sam, I have a question regarding this. Was this a budgeted item, this tree fixing stuff? Was this budgeted?
Yeah, well, we had, no.
Okay.
No,
Making
no, it's
sure.
not.
All right. Because, I guess my point is, if these are budgeted items, the bid process can go a lot quicker. All right.
Very good point. If it's not budgeted item and there's not money in the budget to do it, then this probably is something that's not going to get done until next budget year.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm
Yeah,
just.
we need to move forward on this tree.
My issue on it is a lot of times I watch this board and we make motions and vote on things that we're completely wasting our time voting on. We've already approved the budget, so we don't need to approve it again. I don't have a list in front of me of motions that I think are wasted, time motions, but I put a value on my time, and I'd say everybody else does too. And if they're approving the budget, then kind of like the street project stuff. Hand it off, have the administrator approve a plan, and this board has budgeted the money, let's go. Get Masters Jackson or whoever here and pay this, let's move on. Because I think we dilly-dally around with discussion, you know. We're just rubber stamping something we've already rubber stamped. That's why I was asking about the tree stuff. If it wasn't a budgeted item, I'd just say go get bids and do it, kinda like you did before. I mean, we don't have to follow all the posting of legal requirements, but since it's not budgeted, you're doing it the right way, you're placing an ad and, you know. Anyway, that's my only point.
Very good. Any other questions for Mr. Smith? Seeing none, thank you for that report.
So you got Raymond Kingery's, bids came down?
We've started on it. We've kind of, when we got derailed on the play area out there, from when it froze and rain froze, we couldn't dig out all that mulch, so we moved over to Raymond Kingery's, started working over there while the ground was froze. And, now that it's thawed, we can't get in there without tearing up the ground.
I noticed when you was working on it, so that's good.
We got a good start on it.
He'll be pleased.
Yeah, he's not, I've talked to Raymond, he's
No,
not in
he's
a
not in a
hurry.
big hurry.
He just said as long as he can get it done over the winter, he'll be happy. But, he probably, I'll work through the way done with it. So another solid day and a half, 2 days, we'll be done.
Very good. All right, I'll move on into the city administrator's report. Mr. Burke.
You have my report, sent them all email, the one I'm looking at right now is the last one that I sent this week, it's a little bit short. However, my time has been spent on items that were discussed in closed session instead of the things that I usually spend my time on. But anyway, on this report here, the Heartland Center that was located over here by the Methodist Church has lost their lease on that building, and so they come to me and ask me for a place that they might move that business. And so I put the old city hall because I thought we could put it in there. And I called everybody, and we talked about that and so forth. Since then, I have called them and talked to them, and they're really leaning toward moving to Springfield rather than staying here. And he does still have, he's supposed to meet with me this week. He didn't give me a date. He's still got tomorrow, I guess. He could show up and want to see the building, but anyway. And then the mayor let me know today that we've got some mold growing over there that he needs to take care of. And I haven't been in there to see that, so anyway. The recycle trailers have been moved to their new location, and I'm going to have that open from 8:30 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday to start with, just to get started. And the reason it's not open on the weekend is I didn't think that I would have a chance of getting a paid person out there, so I'm just opening it up during the week for now. And if the demand for it on the weekend becomes apparent, or we begin to hear that we need that, then I can discuss that with you further. The water samples for the south side came back from the lab this week. The south side is the one that we had some problems with. They all come back good. So obviously we've done something right, and the water samples are good.
That's good.
Really, that's all I have. I've got my name and my email address and my phone number on this report. If you have any questions or anything you want a better answer on, or more answers, or something I didn't cover, I'll be glad to get back with anyone that
Okay.
needs that.
Sam, this Heartland Center, have they got several here from Seymour that goes to that?
Yes, they do quite a work here. A lot of that is state funded, you know, and, or,
Bad
yeah,
on the ones that's from here, if they did move this to Springfield.
Yeah.
Because I think there's several from
yes,
here.
there is.
There may be some that don't have transportation.
Yes, ma'am, that's another thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, unless they contact me tomorrow, then they're gonna move on to Springfield. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Any questions for Sam further?
Okay.
Very good.
everyone satisfied that Old City Hall should rent for utilities and $200 a month? Would we be good with that?
Everybody agreed to that.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with it.
I'm very fine
Yeah.
with that. I was
Okay.
told
Yeah.
the initial number I got actually, Sam, was 100, and I'd be
Yes.
fine with 100.
Well, and I knew you were, and I talked to Mary, and she said, you know, let's try 200, and
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
didn't get back
Yeah,
with
we
Well,
everybody.
it wouldn't hurt, it wouldn't
You
hurt
know,
to
I figured
try.
I'd just bring it up and hear everybody
Yeah.
be okay with it.
Well, the worst thing for a building is for it to be empty if we want.
What- right.
Well, that's why you've got the mold in there now, is because the building's set fallow.
Because it sits.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the only issue I had with that, and I emailed Sam in that regard, is that, you know, there are counseling centers here in town that are just new and starting, but very well qualified counselors to do family counseling. However, this is a drug counseling facility. They're out of Kansas City, is where they're headquartered. They got plenty of money to pay the rent. So that'd be my thing. If something should be equitable than trying to subsidize folks, and that'd be real cheap rent for our city hall. But as you say, with no one in there, it's just going downhill. Okay. We're going to talk about, I think, this engineering project here in open session. That's my thought on it. Council members, do you see any reason why we shouldn't talk about our engineering report now?
I have no problem talking about it in open, although I certainly don't want any names of potential tenants talked about in open.
No.
No.
Yeah. Other than that, the engineering report I did, this is a public, sure.
Sure. Well, what I'd like to do then at this time is, because I've got Pud here to talk about how it will affect our water system, and what else did I ask you to talk about? Besides that, the looping of the water, that's it, yeah. Well, I'd first like to ask our engineer to come forward and give us a brief report on what you've done for us, and give us some heads up on that.
I'll introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Miller. I'm with Toth & Associates. We're an engineering firm out of Springfield. Looks like you have copies of the cost estimate and engineering agreement in front of you. Is the map included in that?
We do?
Sam's got them.
Okay, 'cause I've got copies of the map if you don't, but,
Sam emailed this to all of us.
Map is on the back.
Yeah.
oh, okay. So it's on the back of what you've already got there.
Thank you.
So, last week, I met with the mayor and Sam about a potential extension to your water and sewer systems to serve a property it's actually just outside the city limits on the east side of town, property that would be a potential development property. You have a map there of our proposed improvements. We'd be extending water from up near Casey's down south and then boring across the road. We have to utilize a bore there because that's a state highway and MoDOT won't let you open cut the roads to install utilities. You have to bore underneath them. So we put the water on the east side of the street, and bring it down and then connect into an existing water line you have on the south side of Clinton Avenue there. We'd be able to open cut that road since it's county at that point. So that would be the water improvements as shown there. And then there's a green line also about halfway up the page where we connect to an existing sewer line that's also on the west side of Highway K, and then we bring another bore across from the sewer. We have to bore them separately because DNR requires water and sewer to be at least 10 foot apart. So we couldn't put them in the same bore. DNR wouldn't allow that. And then we've got a second water bore proposed up near the high school. There's a dead-end line that ends near the FEMA shelter, and we would bore that underneath the highway there and connect to another dead-end water line on the north side to help with looping water lines. So also, information you have there is a cost estimate for those improvements. This is if the entire project was bid out to a contractor. And then in line items below the construction totals are line items for other professional services involved with the project, engineering, bidding, easements, legal services included on the easements. And so you have the total there for construction and professional services in front of you. So Mayor Chafin asked me to come and today kind of present that to you and answer any questions you guys have about the project, the cost estimates, or what our services as the engineer would be on the project.
What's the timeline on this map?
Well, that depends on how quickly you guys want to go.
Let's say we approved it tonight.
Then we could potentially be surveying to get the project started in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And it would probably take us, I'd say we could, between surveying and design, we could get that accomplished in a couple of months. What could stretch that out is an easement acquisition, because you're working with property owners and they have to be willing to sign it. So that could,
Right.
I can't promise, how willing property owners will be to sign easements, but if all the property owners are agreeable and we could get started right away, we could have the engineering completed in, like I said, 2 to 3 months from now, and then you could get it, bid on the street. I would expect construction to take probably another 2 to 3 months after that. So, yeah, if you gave us the go-ahead tonight, we could, I say in 6 months, you could have the pipe in the ground and
So-
ready to go.
So I'm hearing you say that somewhere around June or July.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
What does
August,
this
yeah.
give us at what's commonly known as the Owen property?
Mhm.
What do we get out of this,
So,
in layman's terms?
so my understanding is, so right now, this property has no water or sewer service. So if someone was wanting to develop this property, they would either have to build their own well, own septic system, or they would have to extend the utilities to them, which is obviously, you can see what the cost of that would be. So it makes this property as a potential spot for development much more appealing to a potential developer, because now he
Right.
can come in and connect to the utilities without having to incur that much cost, or even more than that, to install his own private utilities on the property, which you wouldn't want private utilities installed that close to your city limits. I don't know if you have an urban service boundary or not, but some cities have it where, if you're so close to the city limits, you can't install your own services, you have to connect and annex in, but I don't know what your guys' situation with that is or not, so.
Well, if I were a prospective buyer, if it didn't have utilities, I
You-
wouldn't even consider the
Yeah,
property.
yeah, you look somewhere else.
Now, if we're looking at, and I'm looking at the numbers now, Matt. Here, these are the cost estimates here that you've got before us.
Yes.
And then, of course, your engineering professional fees would be tied into what we're looking at here. And if we contracted with your engineering firm for this dollar amount, then you would certify to us that this was the number.
I would certify that for the engineering, it's the number. For the construction, so that would be competitively, once we got done
Right.
with the plans, we would competitively bid the construction number to contractors. And so I can't certify what
You're just getting
the
us
bids will
estimates of
come
what
out.
you
Right.
sort of anticipate.
Now-
Yeah, so our unit prices here are based off of bids that we've received in the past from contractors.
Correct. Okay,
But I
that-
have no
that's
way
what I
of
wanna make sure
forecasting
of.
what the market forces will be when someone actually bids on this project.
Right, that's why I'm asking the question, so that it'll be clear to everybody.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at here is basically 326,863 for a total project completed, if your projections are all in line.
Yes.
That's taking care of all the contractors, all the materials, working with these folks to make sure that we got the easements for these things to run in.
Yeah, this is the turnkey price if the bids come back where we expect them to.
Right.
Let me ask this, Sam, you're our lead man. Without saying too much, we do have prospective tenants, not only at the Owen property, but for properties that would be in this general vicinity, that would be helped by the services offered there. Would this help us in recruiting them here?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it just adds so much value to the property, and those people that are already looking at it, it makes it even more attractive.
Mhm.
You know, so, yes, it's a very positive thing.
And the prospective buyers are all aware that if we do this, it is expected that they allow us to annex in the Owen property in city limits.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, this would be within your reach to not extend to them the opportunity to tie on to these utilities, because you see what the expense is to the city, and we expect to recover. In fact, we expect to recover and do better. So,
Yeah, the sales tax.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. We have a question from the audience. Bob?
Just a comment, make sure in your engineering, I know you work with Sean, but just make sure you put in the right diameter or enlarged diameter of the vanes for the city's ISO rating. Because there's main, part of ISO is the water supply for those areas. And we've got part of the state where they put in lines in past years, several years back, and they just put in too small.
We've got 6 inches, Bob. Are
Yes.
those that large enough for what you?
You have to talk to Sean, he knows, but if you're gonna have more development, even a 10-inch would be better than you could just start dropping down, and you could answer that probably. Sure. But that's the problem we've had in the past. There was one water extension they did, and when Sean looked at it, they never brought in one fire hydrant anywhere in it.
Well, that's not good.
Well, what we asked Matt to do in the beginning was to consider that whole 10.5 acres with several developments within it. So, so he's taken all that into consideration, but good point, Bob.
Sure. So I'm showing a 6-inch water main extension here, and that is based off the fact that I believe we're connecting into a 6-inch line. Is that correct? A 6 to a 4. So,
I think that's sick, the one coming out of the tower faces. I think that's even too small. Because I know when they put it in, Sean tried to get a big, and there were some issues there, and they wouldn't go.
I'd like to ask Mr. Helms, if you would, to come forward. We might have a question or two for you on how this is going to affect what we're doing out there now. You all know that Mr. Helms is pretty well the man when it comes to any leaks in the city. You know, he knows where valves are to be turned. And so how is this going to augment, how's it going to help us? Bud?
I've got like 36 dead ends right now, and that would eliminate 3. This is great.
Okay.
And like hiring this out instead of us, this guy's got posts to put in, this guy's got stop signs to put up.
Right,
Yeah.
They won't be doing that.
Right.
right. And that's what we had in mind on this thing, to get this thing in, get it done, and then you guys can be hooking up these new businesses as they want to come on.
Yeah, we can do the service.
Yes,
Yeah, this is great. And getting that line over at the door across from the storm shelter, tied into the school.
right. This was another thing that we're talking about, is tying in the storm shelter
Yes.
in the school in this same line, or I guess they're on that line now.
Save money by getting that boring machine here, then we can bore that. Otherwise,
Right. In other words, there's one more bore that we might talk about underneath the K, and that's the one that it would take to facilitate the safety structure, the safe house.
that eliminate a dead end.
Right.
Anytime we can do that, I'm all for it.
Okay. Any question for Mr. Helms?
You do a great job.
Let's do it this week. I'll ask Leslie, you're a clerk, you're a money person. We've got the money to do this, don't we not?
You guys saw the last financial statement, the paper. I'd say the sewer, we have to look in the financial.
I would suggest we finance this the same way we did with this one that went in back of the high school over there, where we borrowed money against our own CDs.
Yeah.
And then if somewhere down the road we got in a bind, we cash those in and pay for it.
Yeah.
Or borrow against them.
Borrow
Like
against
you
them,
said,
yeah, yeah.
But we do have sufficient funds, to answer your
Right,
question,
right.
to carry this if we want to pay for it. But I think that what Jim is suggesting is right. You know, use that as collateral and borrow the money. And then there's 2 or 3 different revenue sources that we might consider in that. Something might be,
Sam?
I have $2 $500,000 letters from the banks, the local banks, where we can borrow money against our CDs. I've already done that.
Okay.
It's in place.
okay, good.
Very good.
So, and I did that to help us with the UV. And as it turned out, the UV wasn't near as much as we thought it would be. And so those 2 letters are in place at our disposal.
Well, cutting to the
That's good.
chase, I don't really want to pontificate this for another 30 minutes. I'll make a motion that we approve this project. Let's go.
I'll second it.
I like it.
Can I interject something real quick, Mr. Mayor?
You may, yes, Mr. Link.
I would recommend, I mean, it's fine if everybody votes that they want to do this project. I would recommend that the actual signing, the contract be brought back at the next meeting with a cover ordinance that, says,
Sure.
attaches the contract and presents authority for the mayor to sign, and basically allows it to be an agenda item that this is actually going to be voted on the off chance that some citizens want to look at it between now and then and come in and complain that, as the agenda sits now, people didn't know that this was necessarily going to be discussed. I mean, I think you all could vote that you want to move forward and do this, but let's bring the actual signing of the contract back in 2 weeks.
We need an ad in the local paper?
No.
No.
Okay.
Question, your motion, that's just for the project, then work on the details.
Exactly.
Diameter and
Yes.
not
Right.
to the point.
My motion is just for the overall concept of the project to be approved, so we can let Mr. Miller begin scheduling this project, so we're at the top of the pecking order, we get this done as quick as possible.
And the only other thing that I would add to all this, Matt, is that start date, a stop date, and a performance bond to back it up. But you'll have that, won't you?
For the contractor.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Good work, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much.
So we've got a motion. and a
We have a
second.
motion on the floor. Do we have a second? We have a second. Any further discussion? Perhaps I should take the magnitude of this matter into consideration and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Jim Ashley?
Yes.
Mary Carpenter?
Yes.
Nadine Chris? Yes. Dan Weimer?
Yes.
Motion carries.
So do we go ahead now at this point and put out bids for construction?
Well,
He does.
No,
he
Matt-
does.
Matt-
They do
Matt
all
will
that.
take-
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Matt's
All right,
gonna
very good.
take care of the
Very
whole
good.
We
thing.
don't have to do
All right.
anymore.
That's the reason we hired them. They're professionals at
Yep.
what they do. We're gonna let PUD fix it, hook up the new businesses as they come in which we hope that there are many, and we anticipate many. And we're just giving him the authority to go forward. So I think you've done well, council. I think you've made a very positive move tonight.
May I add something, please?
You may, Mr. Link. Or, no, I thought it was Link.
This process we're going through is the same one we went through on the UV.
Right.
So we've covered this ground before, and it's not anything new, and we have experience at doing this, so it should be painless is all I'm saying.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, we got that out of the way. Let me just go through a couple of things here. We had a letter, and this was addressed to the mayor, so I'll bring it to your attention. It's from the Missouri State Auditor, and what it actually says that we weren't timely in submitting our reports, and there was reasons, and we'll talk about that further in executive session. But I'd like for you to know tonight that Sam and I have worked with our auditor, our local auditor that audits our books here, to be able to submit that to a report to the state of Missouri. And we have sent them a letter, which Mr. Burke has prepared at my suggestion, and Ms. Houck has taken care of us through the Mr. Marshall Decker's help with the auditing firm here locally, and we have that completed. And Ms. Houck, would you like to add anything to that?
Just that it was sent out Monday and got the confirmation email that they received it. So the financials that were late.
Good deal.
Yeah.
We were late on there, but we're able to get that done through.
Charges for getting right
There is, as of August of 2017, the state legislature saw fit to impose a new set of rules, so to speak, and the fine was $500 a day for every day that you're not in compliance. However, we seem to think that if that was submitted before the end of this 30-day period, that the state would waive that, and we look and expect that to happen.
And we said that in the letter. We expected that to happen.
Yes. All right. I wanted to make you aware of that so that we have done that and got that done. And then, you know, you get these letters every once in a while. This one is not signed. And it just, people are not appreciative of things that are going on, and they cite President Trump, and I'll be glad to let any one of you read this, and you can in the executive session if you like, but it's an unsigned letter, so I don't place a lot of credence in anything that people don't put their name on.
I place zero.
Yeah.
It is a negative letter, but and they mention specifically the old skating rink property there on Anderson Street. So in the next 30 days, I'm going to try to put together something to make, or at least contact this JRC and investment properties, and they're in Springfield, that own that property at present, and see what we can do on that property. And I'll be able to report to you something on it. I don't know exactly what I'll have, because our hands are tied with different ordinance and state mandates. But I'll have something to tell you about that specific piece of property. All right, but that kind of concludes my report, and I'll turn your attention back to the outline of on your agenda, Mr. Paul Link.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be brief. On this utility commission, can someone, I assume Leslie, can somebody email me this? And what I'll do is clean this up, and I know generally what the changes were. I'll clean up, I mean, how the appointment has to be approved by 3 Board of Aldermen, and like technically we're a 4th-class city, so where it says city council, it needs to say Board of Aldermen. So I'll clean up some of just the logistics of how this all works and have that ready for the next meeting with all cleaned up and whatnot, and all of the changes that were voted on earlier.
Correct.
That's my document, and I'll send it to you.
Okay. And then the only other thing is on the agreement for professional services with Toad. I'll get with Leslie, but I would recommend that next council meeting there be an ordinance on the agenda for accepting the Toad agreement and giving Mayor Chapin authority from the board to execute it. And so those 2 things will be brought back to the next meeting.
Very good. Anything further?
I have nothing further.
Any questions from the council? Seeing none, thank you for that report. Anything else to come before this meeting? Oh, no, I need to go through the Alderman report, don't I? All right, I'm gonna start down here on my left with Jim Ashley.
We've got quite a few things to do and close, so I'm gonna pass this time.
We do, okay, thank you. Councilman Carpenter.
Okay, I'm gonna bring this up again. We need to amend the ordinance section 115.020, section B, from indefinite to yearly appointments. I don't believe that anybody should have indefinite employment. I just don't. That's my feelings.
Well, that would free up the section or the negative part of it that we can't give them any raises too. So
Right.
if
Larry,
we
that's-
did that,
That's not why this is being done, and you know, I mean, what is that old saying that they said so long? I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. Now, that's not, so we can't give Sam or Leslie a raise. I mean, there's ways to give these folk raises, and Paul's pointed out some of them. Shoot, we can bring him back in and rehire him, give him a raise if we want to.
We
There's
could.
cost of living adjustments that can be done.
we could.
There is absolutely no reason to do this.
But there's no reason to have it,
To have what?
the indefinite employment.
Well, if they're not doing their jobs, they
No,
can
that's
be
not it. You
terminated.
didn't answer me.
They can be
There
terminated.
is not a reason that anybody should have indefinite employment.
Sure there is. When, at the end of a year, if it's a 1-year appointment, at the end of that year, if a new mayor comes in, Sam may be doing the greatest job in the world. But if that mayor appoints somebody else, Sam's out of the picture altogether.
I still don't believe anybody should have it.
But why? I mean,
That's
you're
what
saying you
I
don't, you're
believe.
saying you
I
don't
do
believe
not-
it, but
I
give
do
me
not think
reasons.
there's any job that needs to be protected. If a person is doing the job, they're not gonna need protecting.
I don't know where the protection's at you're referring to.
Just what you said. If a new mayor comes in, he can appoint somebody else. But if everybody's doing their job, he's not going to
Oh,
appoint
they
somebody.
will, and they can, and they have.
Well, I don't believe it, but that's all I have to say.
I mean, it used to be what you're asking, it's what you're saying.
Exactly.
And it was changed for a reason.
Well, I've got two suggestions. I've got one that, to ask Mary if you'd like to put it in form of a motion. Second of all, would you like to maybe move it to the next meeting because this one's pretty full? But the chair will listen to whichever is your pleasure.
I don't think it matters, this meeting, next meeting. I keep bringing it up and nothing gets done.
Well, what we could do on that, you could make a motion to that effect, and then we could get a second on that motion, then we'd have discussion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to amend the ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to amend the ordinance.
To say what are we, what?
The,
Go
the,
back
the
to
ordinance
where it was.
says,
It's
Ordinance
from
in front of me.
indefinite employment, I should have brought it,
I could get it.
indefinite to yearly appointment. Back to the yearly appointments instead of indefinite.
I'm gonna ask Mr. Link to weigh in on that briefly.
Briefly, I would just say, if we can't just amend ordinances on the fly without posting it
Yes,
on the
yeah.
agenda for Sunshine Law.
Okay.
It has to be read
I
twice.
guess
Then
my
get
thought
it
would be
posted.
is if the board would want to vote on something like this, there needs to be a new ordinance drafted with whatever changes Alderman Carpenter is suggesting, and that be brought back and be an agenda item as a potential ordinance change, and then let the board review that as changes and vote it up or down.
Here's my suggestion on this issue. I would prefer personally to table this discussion until after April elections. That's the annual time, I guess, you can look at appointments if that's happening. But we held off this long. I'd rather discuss this. We've got a lot of stuff on our plate right now. this like is low scale to me. Like,
That's,
Mary,
that's
just my
fine.
opinion.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, here's the way that needs to work, and a point well taken, Councilman. If the originator of the motion wishes to amend that to say that table it this time until the after the election in April, then you may so do that. So what is your pleasure,
I'll
Councilman
make
Nash?
the motion to postpone it until after the election in April.
Okay, now we have a motion to review this, but after the election. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. So at the April, what would that be? The April, the first meeting
First
after the
meeting in
April
April,
4th
after the election.
election, yes. All right, we'll move on then to Councilman Crisp. Oh, Mary, did you have anything else?
Nope,
Okay.
that's it. Bob, I had someone ask me, how long does the emergency siren sound when you put them on?
It's automatic 3 minutes.
Well, I wasn't sure, I didn't know what to tell them.
And after 3 minutes, if it does not shut off, it'll blow the fuse, then it won't go off. We redo the fuses. But it's set for 3. Like the other night, I blew it the second time.
Yeah.
After 3 minutes down, then it's okay to hit it again if you need to.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I didn't know what to tell them because I didn't know. Then someone asked me if, was any reason that we couldn't take the fire department's name off the old city hall down there.
I see none. Sam?
In fact, I wasn't even aware that it stayed on there.
Well, I'm not
But,
either.
yeah.
It says.
Yeah,
no
it's
parking
still
on the
there.
doors.
Okay.
Does it say,
Never been changed.
does it say city Seymour Fire Department? I don't know what it says. It says fire department. It says fire department, I think.
Fire lane, no
Yeah.
parking?
I think maybe fire department, I can't remember.
Well, if you would like that removed, I don't think that's a big problem, Sam, if you could just see to it that that's painted over. I think he's making a note even as we
Okay.
speak.
But that's all that I've got.
Very good. I'll move on to our new councilman.
I have nothing.
Nothing further? Then with that, I need a motion to move to executive session.
I made it.
I'll second.
Could I have roll call vote, please?
Jim Ashley?
Yes.
Mary Carpenter? Maybe
Yes.
Chris? Dan Weaver?
This meeting stands adjourned, and this council will move to executive session.